Thriller Bark sucks? One Piece recap, part number 1. Thank you for tuning in. Before I hop into the main point of this video, I want to take a second and say, guys, I apologize for not being very consistent with my uploading the last 2 weeks. I've been super busy at work, and life things come up, networking and whatnot, but I'm officially back now, and I have just finished Thriller Bark, and I have not a ton, but quite a few things here that I want to go over, items from the arc, things that I have opinions on, things I want to talk about, and recap really what I thought about the arc, because a lot of you were commenting on my last One Piece video that I made, which was, I finally started One Piece and you should too. That video did really well, and a lot of you commented that you wanted to see me talk about what I thought about each arc as I progressed through them. So, yeah, this is going to be what I thought about Thriller Bark and my whole opinion on it, and if I thought it was a good arc, bad, the ugly, everything. And at the end of the day, if I'm going to do this for every arc now in One Piece. I'm going to keep doing this, this whole series, and we're going to see how it goes. I might split it up into different episodes depending on important things that happen in the story, or I could just wait and do an entire arc when I finish it. Now, that might be a little difficult because you guys know how long the One Piece arcs are, especially in the anime. But without further ado, let's continue. One of the main topics of Thriller Bark, and one of the first characters that we are introduced to, is Brook. And I gotta say, Brook is pretty funny. I love the skeleton jokes because he is a skeleton. We learned about Brook's story and how he's basically dead already, and he somehow came back to having no shadow, and we learned that eventually he is the best friend of the whale Laboon that we saw in, like, how many episodes before that? It felt like a million. But I like Brook, and he's definitely not one of my favorite characters right now, and there's a few reasons why. One of the most obvious reasons that Brook is not my favorite character right now is just because he's a skeleton, and no offense to skeletons, we all have them, but he's only a skeleton. He's a skeleton in an afro, and it doesn't really make sense that he can still talk and do all the conventional things that a human can, and I can understand that One Piece is a make-believe story, and a lot of it, not a lot of it is very realistic at all. I mean, for God's sake, we have Luffy having gum-gum powers. That's not realistic whatsoever. But the whole idea that Brook can cry, pant, sweat, talk, breathe, get horny, all of those things just don't really compute with me personally. I know a lot of you may be big Brook fans out there, but me personally, like I said, he's not my favorite character at the moment, but he's definitely not my least favorite character either. In the beginning of the arc, we learned that the Straw Hats are stuck on this mysterious island, and one thing that I loved about Thriller Bark overall was the uniqueness of the characters and the dynamic of the different creatures that we see. So a lot of times in One Piece, we see either pirates or marines, some kind of warriors out there with maybe swordsmen, different things like that, fishman, but for this arc, we had zombies, which was very cool because I feel like it added a new perspective and dynamic to the story that we didn't previously have, because it wasn't just pirates, it wasn't just marines, it was zombies, and that's something we hadn't seen, or I hadn't seen in the story up to this point. I really liked that, and I also liked the uniqueness of each different zombie. They weren't all just lifeless zombies that you see on The Walking Dead. They were different animals, they were different plants, they were different objects. There was ghosts, ghouls, some zombies could fly, some zombies had all kinds of different abilities, and that's one thing that I really enjoyed about this arc overall was the uniqueness, especially in the beginning. One huge negative aspect that I absolutely despised about Thriller Bark was Nami, Chopper, and Usopp screaming every 2 seconds. Guys, I kid you not, if you're someone that has read the manga of One Piece, maybe you can't relate to what I'm talking about, but for anybody out there who's watched the anime, you understand that once Thriller Bark starts and Nami, Usopp, and Chopper get split up from the rest of the crew and are exploring the island, the screaming is absolutely constant. Guys, it felt like every 5 seconds I was hearing what you just heard. I didn't enjoy it. I thought the first couple were funny, but after a while, it just... I understand they're scared, but it was definitely annoying. Another aspect of Thriller Bark that I wasn't a huge fan of was Nami's shower scene and her basically getting assaulted by Absalom, who is the invisible man. Now, Absalom's ability with the clear fruit wasn't that bad. I thought that was pretty cool and unique and something that we hadn't seen yet in the story. However, the whole idea that he wants to marry Nami just because he saw her naked was kind of odd to me and peculiar. Also because for me, it didn't really feel like it added anything to the story. Like, if Nami would have gotten married to him somehow, which we knew most likely wasn't going to happen because none of us really I didn't take that whole problem very seriously. What does that do for the story for me? Not much. I didn't really like that was a whole topic and a whole idea. It just kind of felt like it was kind of a filler part, like a filler in the actual story, just to fill in for when Luffy was gone or when the main characters their shadows were taken and the characters were knocked out. It just felt like a waste of time. One thing that also I wasn't too fond of when it came to the story and one of my favorite characters, Sanji, was the fact that Sanji said something really peculiar while he was fighting Absalom. Sanji made it seem as if he had some sort of backstory with Absalom, but it turns out he didn't. The only reason he was mad at Absalom was because Absalom ate the clear fruit, allowing him to turn invisible. And the only reason that Sanji was mad was because he couldn't use that power himself to peep on naked women while they were taking showers. Yeah, I didn't like that part. It just, again, felt kind of irrelevant to me. We are then introduced to one of the 7 warlords of the sea, Gecko Moria, and pretty much the main antagonist of this arc. Now, I gotta say, of all the 7 warlords, well, I haven't seen all 7 quite yet, but of all the warlords that I've seen up to this point, Gecko Moria is definitely on the lower end of the tier list, and there's a few reasons why. Moria's abilities took a while to actually come into fruition and appear in the story. So, for a few moments we first saw Gecko Moria, we didn't know what his abilities were. We knew that he could steal shadows. But I was kind of confused on what else he could do. That ability, in my opinion, seemed kind of lame just because I didn't see him fight Luffy. I didn't see him really killing off anybody, and I didn't see this flash of ability that we usually see from characters like that, such as Hawkeye Mihawk when he was introduced. Or even Doflamingo, we saw a little bit of his abilities, and it just seemed that Gecko Moria wasn't really as powerful as those guys or as imposing of a character as those guys, someone that you saw and kind of striked fear into your heart. Another really quick point that I want to hit on that I did not like about this arc, the laughing of certain characters. Gecko Moria's laugh is straight up awful. I gotta say, Foxy's laugh is awful. I had Foxy's laugh before I saw this arc as the most annoying laugh I've ever heard in the series, or in any series in general. But after hearing Gecko Moria's laugh and Dr. Hogback's laugh for the last 50 episodes of this arc, I stand corrected. Those two take the cake for the most annoying laughs in the entire series. The whole idea of Gecko Moria stealing shadows from different characters and then using them to resurrect an army of zombies that have different abilities depending on the character that lost their shadow is really cool to me. I thought that was very unique and something that we obviously haven't seen before, and that was one of the positives I took from this arc overall. Eventually, our main character, Luffy, gets his shadow stolen, and what ends up happening is Gecko Moria inserts that shadow into a giant ogre zombie called Oars. Now, Oars is very interesting of a character. He's a big Goliath kind of creature. I didn't really like Oars, I'll be completely honest with you, and again, there's a few reasons why. One of them is because he's just a really stupid version of Luffy. I mean, all he cares about is food, and then he says he wants to become king of the pirates, and then he tries to use the Gum Gum ability, and he can't use it. And another thing about his abilities, He doesn't really have any unique abilities. He doesn't even really get the Gum Gum ability until after Gecko Moria inserts himself into his stomach. And then he's using the ability at free will. And it took a while for us to even see that and experience it. So I thought Ors was pretty lame, and he's really powerful, but again, not one of my favorite antagonists. We eventually learn in the arc that the zombies' main weakness and their way to get their shadows out of them and give them back to the person that they belong to is salt. And my whole confusion was there was a character known as Shindri, and she is this woman who became a zombie after she died from an accident that happened on stage because she was a stage performer, and Dr. Hogback brought her back for his sick, wild desires because he had a crush on her. One thing I didn't understand about that character specifically was when Chopper was talking to her and then convinced her and told her that she had used to be human before. That didn't really make sense to me because none of that worked on any of the other zombies, so it didn't make sense that Chopper could literally say, like, talk to her for 3 minutes and then all of a sudden she could remember somehow that she was human. It's like, why didn't you do that with any of the other zombies, Chopper? You know, that part, again, didn't really compute to me. Maybe she's a more advanced level of zombie somehow. Maybe they explained it at some point, but again, that part didn't really make sense to me. And yeah, I didn't really like it. I was kind of frustrated when I saw that, actually. Toward the end of the arc of Thriller Bark, it ramps up incredibly because we are introduced to Kuma, who is another one of the 7 warlords of the sea. And I gotta say, Thriller Bark had probably the worst beginning of an arc that I've seen thus far in One Piece. However, of all the episodes that I've seen, it's had damn near one of the best endings that I've seen so far. The final battle ensues between the Straw Hat Pirates and Ors as well as Gecko Moria. And Nightmare Luffy is introduced. I really liked Nightmare Luffy. It was very unique. It was something we hadn't seen before and probably I'll never see again. I'm not sure. But I thought it was amazing when the concept of him absorbing all those shadows, all the 100 shadows, and then he came out and then just whooped Ors's ass. And then Ors was still alive because he's dead already, technically. And Luffy could only use that power for 10 minutes. I thought that was a really good concept. And again, it's really unique. And I really enjoyed that. And I also enjoyed that the power ran out and that he didn't just use that as a crutch to finish off the fight and end it like that. Right before the sun is about to rise and the Straw Hats are going to be completely disintegrated because they don't have their shadows anymore, Gecko Moria decides to absorb all of the 1,000 shadows in Thriller Bark. I guess I should say zombie shadows in Thriller Bark. And when he does, he becomes this ginormous version of himself. And I thought that part was really cool. It was pretty sick to see Gecko Moria kind of absorb all those shadows and become this like monster we've never seen before. He didn't last very long, but I thought it definitely added a little bit of a twist, a little bit of a scary twist to the end of the series. Well, arc, I should say. After Luffy finishes off Gecko Moria, I almost said Ors for some reason. He finishes off Ors and then Gecko Moria. Kuma comes out and he gets a order from the government to eliminate everybody on the island, including the Straw Hats. This is when the story really ramps up and the ending is absolutely incredible for a few different reasons. We learn that Kuma had eaten the pawpaw fruit. We also learn that he is part robot, kind of like Frankie. And he uses this power to create this mass of air, I guess air, energy, air, and he literally blows up damn near everything around him, and everybody is knocked out, everybody's down. Luffy can't move after using Gear 3, and it seems like it's over for our characters. But Kuma makes a decision and says that he will spare everybody's life if he takes the head of Luffy back to the government. After everybody is wiped out, Zoro and Sanji end up being the last ones standing to face off against Kuma. Sanji says he wants to sacrifice himself to save the crew. Zoro says the same thing. Zoro ends up knocking him out, claiming that he is the warrior of the crew, so he should be the one to step up and defend them against Kuma, who Sanji is a cook and is therefore irreplaceable, which obviously we all know that every person, every member of the Straw Hat crew is irreplaceable to us. But Zoro ends up taking the bet and making one of the craziest decisions that I have seen thus far in the series. Zoro is willing to sacrifice his life in place of Luffy's, claiming that his bounty is very high, not quite as high as Luffy's, but Kuma can take his head instead back to the government. Instead, what ends up happening, Kuma sees the resolve in Zoro and sees his loyalty to his captain and the love he has for his fellow Straw Hat crew members. And he decides to absorb all of the pain and anguish and brutality that Luffy had absorbed from fighting Gecko Moria and Oars, and he takes it and he puts it all into this red ball. And Zoro ends up going off to a different part of the island and absorbing all of that pain that Luffy had just suffered, and somehow he survived it. One of the most iconic moments in the story then ensues when everybody wakes up and Sanji goes to look for Zoro. And when he gets there, Zoro is bloody as hell. Just, I'm talking dripping blood, looks miserable, and looks like he can barely stand. And the fact that he's still alive is such a miracle. And all he does is say, nothing happened. When Sanji asks him what happened, he says nothing happened. And that really speaks volumes to the type of character that Zoro is, and I think that was a great way to end the arc, because it's such a great way to develop Zoro's character and really put him into a new light and perspective that we hadn't seen before. You know, it's not all about Luffy 24/7. It's not all about Sanji. It's all about every character, and that's one of the things I love the most about the arc. If you ask me who the MVP was, most valuable pirate of this arc, it was Zoro, 100%. And truly, that was one of the best endings that I've seen to an arc thus far in the series. So, you know what they say, it's not about how you start, it's about how you finish. And Thriller Bark did a very good job in finishing out its arc. With all that being said, I guess I should probably leave it up to a rating out of 10. And for me, I'm gonna say that Thriller Bark is a good 6 out of 10. Now, the only reason I'm saying 6 out of 10 is because I am an optimistic person, and the things that I watch, I try to take everything I can from the story and from the series that I'm watching and find the theme of them. And for me, Thriller Bark was pretty good. It didn't hold my attention the entire way through. However, it definitely had its moments, and I cannot wait to continue the story, continue the series, and progress with the One Piece adventure. And I've heard that after Thriller Bark, things get really, really interesting, and the story picks up tremendously. I've heard that from multiple people in the comments. I've heard that from multiple people in messages. I've heard it from multiple people that I work with that have watched the story and followed it along as well. Comment down below what you thought about Thriller Bark. Do you think it was the worst arc ever? Is it the best arc ever? Do you love the way it ended? Do you love the way it began? Do you hate it and you wish it never existed? Comment down below your thoughts. Let me know.